I saw the photo at 6:12 on a Tuesday evening, standing in my kitchen with a cold plate of pasta in one hand and my phone in the other. Our company retreat had ended 2 days earlier. Lily had come back tired, sun-kissed, and just distracted enough to blame it on travel. I believed her because I had spent 11 years learning how to make ugly details look harmless. Then someone from her office shared a group picture from the closing dinner. At first glance, it looked normal. 30 people on a rooftop terrace. String lights overhead. Wine glasses lifted. The city wash gold behind them. Everyone was smiling the way people do when work is paying for food. But my eyes stopped at Lily before I even knew why. She was laughing. Not the polite smile she used at networking events. Not the careful, measured expression she wore around clients. She was folded into a real laugh, head slightly back, one hand pressed against the chest of her division director, Grant Holloway, like she had touched him there 100 times before and never once thought about it. His arm was around her waist, not hovering, not accidental, resting there. Natural, that was the word that kept bothering me. It looked natural, like the photographer had interrupted something already in progress. The caption under the post said, "Nothing beats real partnerships. Strong teams build strong futures. Too cute, too polished, too pointed." What bothered me more were the comments. Finally posting the dream team. Power duo energy. Now, this is leadership chemistry. One person had added 3 laughing emojis and written, "Some partnerships are better off-site." I read that one twice. Then a third time. The room around me got very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. A faucet in the sink dripped every few seconds. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere down the street. Ordinary sounds. Steady sounds. But inside me, something had shifted just enough that I knew I wouldn't put it back. Lily came in from upstairs wearing gray lounge pants and one of my old Navy t-shirts, drying her hair with a towel. "What are you staring at?" she asked. I turned the phone toward her. "This." She glanced once, too quickly. "Oh, that? Everyone's been reposting those." Her voice was light, practiced. I watched her longer than I answered. "Looks like you had fun." She smiled, but only with her mouth. It was a retreat, Ethan. That's kind of the point. Then she reached for a fork, stole a bite from my plate, and walked away like the picture meant nothing. I stood there with the post still open, my thumb resting over the comments. It wasn't proof. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even enough for a fight. But it sat wrong. And some things sit wrong because they are wrong. I didn't bring the photo up again that night. That was the first thing that unsettled Lily. Not anger, not accusations, just silence. I washed my plate, wiped the counter, and asked whether she wanted tea. She kept looking at me like she was waiting for the real reaction to arrive. It didn't. Later, when she fell asleep beside me, I stayed awake and let the last year replay in slow pieces. The late leadership sync that ran past midnight 3 Thursdays in a row. The hotel charge on our joint card from February. Billed to a boutique place downtown, even though she told me her team dinner ended at 9 and everyone went home after. When I asked about it then, she said the finance department had booked rooms by mistake and reversed the charge later. I remember because she answered too fast, with details I hadn't asked for. A canceled dinner with me because Grant needed numbers cleaned up before morning. A weekend conference where she mentioned everyone except him. That part came back sharp. Lily used to tell stories about work the way some people empty their pockets at the end of the day. Names, complaints, small office politics, who embarrass themselves in meetings. Then, sometime around winter, Grant stopped appearing in those stories at all. Not less often. Never. Like she had cut him out so carefully it was visible. Around midnight. Her phone buzzed once on the nightstand. She shifted in her sleep, but didn't wake. I didn't touch it. I just watched the screen light up and go dark again. The next morning she was brighter than usual, moving around the kitchen in a silk blouse and heels too sharp for a normal Wednesday. Pouring coffee. Checking messages. Humming under her breath like she wanted the apartment to feel easy. I sat at the table and said, "That post got a lot of attention." Her hand paused on the coffee pot. "People are stupid online." "Yeah," I said. "They usually mean more than they say." She looked at me then. Really looked. What does that mean? I folded my napkin once and stood. Nothing. Just interesting. That landed harder than shouting would have. I could see it in her face. By noon, she texted me. Are you upset about that picture? I didn't answer for 27 minutes. Then I sent back. Not upset. Just noticing a few things now. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Came back. What things? I stare at the screen, already knowing fear grows faster in vagueness than in detail. So I wrote, we can talk later. No rush. When I got home that evening, Lily was already there, dressed down, no makeup, sitting straight on the couch with both hands around a mug she hadn't touched. She had the posture of someone bracing for impact. I took off my coat, set my keys down, and for the first time since seeing that photo, I understood something simple. I wasn't imagining this. She was scared of what I might already know. There was a document I hadn't thought about in years, not because it wasn't important, but because it had always been framed as something harmless, symbolic, a formality to keep everyone comfortable when Lily's family expanded consulting firm into my region. I found it the next morning at 5:40 a.m., sitting at the dining table with my laptop open and the city still dark outside. The file was exactly where I knew it would be. Minor Stakeholder Agreement, Addendum C. I remember the day I signed it. Lily's mother had poured wine, smiled too warmly, and called it a gesture of trust, a way to make me feel included without complicating the ownership structure. I hadn't argued. At the time, I was focused on building a life with Lily, not dissecting paperwork written by people who had already decided the outcome. Back then, I trusted her. Now I read every line. Slowly, carefully. The language was clean, legal, almost polite. It talked about shared interests, brand protection, continuity planning. Nothing that sounded aggressive. Nothing that looked like a weapon. Until page 7. That's where the tone shifted. A clause buried under reputational safeguards. I leaned back slightly, reading it twice to make sure I wasn't adding meaning that wasn't there. If a partner's conduct, public or private, posed a credible risk to the firm's reputation, temporary control could be reassigned to another stakeholder for stability and review. No courtroom needed. No dramatic vote. Just a formal trigger and board acknowledgement. Temporary on paper. Powerful in reality. I closed the laptop halfway, letting the edge rest against my fingers. Lily had always treated the company like it was untouchable, protected, almost immune to consequences because of who her mother was and how long they had built it. But this clause wasn't written to protect individuals. It was written to protect the company from individuals, including her. I thought about the photo again. The comments, the way people outside her control were already interpreting something she hadn't even tried to hide. Public perception. That was the phrase the clause kept repeating. Not truth, not proof, perception. I stood up, poured myself coffee, and let the quiet settle around me. There was a difference between being hurt and being positioned. I wasn't interested in reacting anymore. I was interested in understanding what options existed. When Lily came into the kitchen, she hesitated when she saw me already dressed. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." She nodded slowly, studying my face like she was trying to read something written too small. "Are we going to talk about yesterday?" she asked. I took a sip of coffee and met her eyes. "Soon," I said. "There are a few things I want to review first." That word stayed in the air. Review, not argue, not fix. Review. She didn't say anything after that, but the way her fingers tightened around her mug told me she understood something had changed. And this time, it wasn't just between us. I waited 2 days before saying anything that sounded like concern, not because I needed time to think. That part was already done. I waited because timing matters more than words when you want someone to underestimate you. Wednesday evening, Lily came home later than usual, 7:48 p.m. I noticed the time because dinner had gone cold twice already. The apartment smelled faintly of garlic and butter, something I had cooked out of habit, not appetite. She walked in talking, not to me, but into her phone. "No, just send me the revised numbers. I'll fix it in the morning." Her voice was light again, controlled, professional. She hung up, set her bag down, and gave me a quick smile. Sorry, long day. I nodded. Seems like it. We ate quietly for a few minutes. The kind of silence that isn't empty, just full of things neither person is willing to place on the table yet. Halfway through, I set my fork down. You should probably check in with your mother soon. She blinked. Just once. But it was enough. What? She said, almost laughing. Why? I took a sip of water before answering. No reason, just a feeling. She leaned back slightly, studying me. Ethan, you don't just have feelings about my mother. What is this about? I met her eyes, steady. You've been more visible lately. That's all. Visible, she repeated. Public, I said. People notice things. They talk. Her jaw tightened for a fraction of a second before she smoothed it out with a smile. This is about that picture again? It's about patterns, I replied. There was again that word, patterns. She exhaled through her nose, a quiet sign of irritation slipping through. You're overthinking. It was a company retreat. People joke. They post things and then they move on. Do they? I asked calmly. Yes, she said, sharper now. Normal people do. I didn't react. I just picked up my fork again and took another bite, letting the moment stretch. That was the part she didn't know how to handle. No argument. No escalation. Just control. She shook her head slightly, like she was brushing something off. I don't need to call my mother because of some stupid social media post, Ethan. I didn't say you needed to. I replied, I said you should. And I'm saying you're making something out of nothing. I nodded once. That's possible. Silence fell again. But this time it wasn't neutral. It was tight, uncomfortable. She pushed her plate away, appetite gone. I don't know what's going on with you lately, she said. But this, whatever this is, it's unnecessary. I stood, collecting both our plates. Maybe, when I turned back toward the sink, I added, almost casually, just don't be surprised if someone else brings it up before you do. That landed. I didn't need to look at her to know it. I could feel the shift behind me, the stillness, the calculation. But instead of leaning into it, she chose the easier path. Dismissal. Nothing is going to happen, she said, more to convince herself than me. I rinsed the plates under warm water, watching the steam rise. All right, I said quietly, and I let her believe that. I didn't start looking into the company because of the photo. That's what made it worse. I had already been looking. It started 3 months earlier, quietly, almost by accident. Lily had asked me to review a set of regional expense summaries. Not formally, just a second pair of eyes over dinner. The way couples pretend their work lives overlap. Something didn't line up. Not enough to accuse. Just enough to notice. Numbers rounded too cleanly. Travel expenses grouped in ways that made sense on paper, but not in practice. Project allocations that shifted between departments without a clear reason. At the time, I said nothing. I just remembered. Now, sitting in my home office with the door half closed and the lights off except for the glow of my screen, I opened a folder I had named months ago, Variance Notes. Inside were screenshots, exports, timestamps, small things, individually harmless, together, structured. I moved through them slowly. A retreat expense categorized under client acquisition instead of internal development. 3 hotel bookings tied to Lily's division, all approved by Grant, all overlapping with dates that didn't match official schedules. A consulting project that had been reassigned twice in 1 quarter, landing under a budget line that allowed more flexibility, less scrutiny. I leaned back in my chair, letting the patterns settle into something clearer. This wasn't sloppiness. Sloppiness is random. This was directional. I opened another file. Emails this time. Not stolen. Not hacked. Just ones Lily had forwarded to herself and left synced across devices she assumed I never checked. Short threads. Efficient language. Grant writing. Let's keep this under the retreat allocation. Lily replying. Understood. I'll adjust the reporting. No explanations. No questions. That was the part that mattered. People explain things when they're unsure. They don't when they've done it before. I closed the email and stared at the wall for a moment. This wasn't just about Lily anymore, or even about Grant. This was about a system that assumed no one was watching closely enough to connect the pieces. I turned back to the screen and started organizing everything. Dates aligned with transactions. Transactions aligned with communications. Communications aligned with events. Clean, linear, quiet. By the time the clock hit 2:13 a.m., I had something that didn't look like suspicion anymore. It looked like structure. I saved the folder under new name. Review package. Not accusation. Not evidence. Just something that asked a question clearly enough that it couldn't be ignored. The next morning, Lily knocked lightly on the office door before opening it. "You were up late," she said, stepping inside. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. Her eyes flicked to the laptop, then back to me. "Work." Something like that. She hesitated, then smiled, softer this time. "We should probably reset this weekend. You and me. No work, no stress." I held her gaze for a second longer than necessary. "Maybe," I said. She nodded, relieved by the lack of resistance. But as she turned to leave, I added, "By the way, how often does Grant approve your expense adjustments directly?" She stopped, just for a second. Then she looked back over her shoulder, expression carefully neutral. "Why?" I gave a small shrug, just curious. She studied me, searching for something I wasn't giving her. Then she smiled again. "More often than you'd think," she said, and walked out. I listened to her footsteps fade down the hall, then turned back to the screen. That answer told me everything I needed, not because of what she said, but because she didn't ask how I knew to ask it. I sent the email at 9:17 a.m., not from my phone, not impulsively, from my desk, after reading it 6 times and removing anything that sounded emotional. The subject line was simple: request for internal review, reputational clause consideration. No accusations, no names in bold, no dramatic language, just structure. I addressed it to the board distribution list. People I had met only a handful of times over the years. People who cared about one thing above everything else: stability. I attached 2 files. The first was a photo, not cropped, not highlighted, just the original post, comment included. The second was the document I had built. Review package. Clean, chronological, neutral. I didn't tell them what to think. I gave them enough to start thinking on their own. The body of the email was 4 paragraphs, measured, professional, deliberately calm. I wrote that recent public material may create interpretational risks regarding leadership boundaries, that I had noticed inconsistencies in expense allocation and reporting structures connected to the same division. No conclusions, only alignment. Then I referenced the clause, not aggressively, just precisely. As outlined in Addendum C, Section 7, I am formally requesting a preliminary review to determine whether temporary oversight adjustments are necessary to protect the firm's public standing. That was it. No threats, no pressure, just a request that, once filed, couldn't be ignored. I read it one last time. Then I pressed send. The sound was almost nothing, a soft click of the key, but it felt final. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment. This wasn't revenge. It was process. At 9:26 a.m., I received the first response. Acknowledgement from the board secretary. Formal, brief, at receipt, under review. That was fast, faster than it should have been, which meant one thing. They were already sensitive. At 10:03 a.m., Lily called. I watched the screen light up, let it ring twice, then answered. "Hey," I said. Her voice was tight, controlled, but thinner than usual. "Did you send something to the board?" No greeting, no context, straight to the point. "Yes," I said. Silence. Then sharper, "What exactly did you send?" "A request for review," I replied. "Review of what?" she asked. But there was already tension under the question, like she knew the shape of the answer and didn't want to hear out loud. "Public perception," I said, "and some internal inconsistencies." Her breath caught, just slightly. "Ethan, what are you doing?" I stood up slowly and walked toward the window, looking down at the street below. People moving normally. Car stopping at lights. Everything steady. I'm following the agreement your family asked me to sign, I said. That was symbolic, she snapped. The first crack. Maybe, I replied, but it's still enforceable. You're overreacting, she said quickly. This is insane. It's a picture and some accounting noise. It's a pattern, I interrupted, calm. That word again. Patterns. She went quiet, then softer, more urgent. You need to stop this before it turns into something bigger. I almost smiled. It already is, I said. Another silence. Longer this time. When she spoke again, the control was slipping. You're going to cause damage you can't undo. I looked at my reflection in the glass. No, I said quietly. I think I'm just the first one to notice it. I ended the call before she could answer, and for the first time since all of this started, I felt something settle into place. Not relief, not satisfaction, just clarity. Whatever happened next wasn't going to be contained anymore. The article went live at 11:42 a.m. I wasn't looking for it. That was the part that made it effective. It found me, a notification from a local business journal. I didn't even remember subscribing to, the kind of publication that rarely matters. Until it does. The headline was careful. Too careful. Blurred boundaries in leadership. When professional lines become personal risks. No names. No accusations. Just a photo embedded halfway through the article. The same one. Lily. Grant. His hand on her waist. Her laughing like the moment belonged to both of them. I read the piece once. Then again, slower. The tone was neutral, analytical. It talked about perception governance, the increasing scrutiny on executive behavior in mid-sized firms. It mentioned how informal dynamics at retreats could signal deeper structural issues if left unchecked. It never said they were having an affair. It didn't need to. It asked the question in a way that made readers answer it themselves. At the bottom, the author's name, Clara Holloway. I stared at it for a few seconds before the connection settled. His wife, a local journalist. That changed the scale of everything instantly. This wasn't internal anymore. This was narrative. By 12:10 p.m., the article had been shared 3 times on LinkedIn. By 12:25, one of the board members had reposted it with a single line, important perspective. No commentary, just acknowledgement. That was enough. At 12:32, Lily called again. I answered this time on the first ring. What did you do? She asked, voice shaking now, the control from earlier gone. Nothing new, I said. That article, she started. I didn't write it. I know you didn't write it, she snapped. But this is connected to what you sent. You started this. I leaned against the desk, watching the cursor blink on my screen. No, I said calmly. I documented something that was already visible. That's not the same thing, she said quickly. This is public now, Ethan. Do you understand what that means? Yes, I said. It means people are paying attention. She let out a sharp breath. Grant is already dealing with this. His wife, this is... She stopped herself. That pause told me more than anything she could have said. You should probably talk to your mother now, I said quietly. Silence. Then lower, almost pleading. You need to call the board and stop this. Tell them it's nothing. Tell them you overreacted. I didn't overreact. You're destroying everything, she said. I shook my head slightly, even though she couldn't see it. No, I replied. I think everything is just being seen clearly for the first time. Another silence. But this one was different. Not resistance. Realization. Because she understood something now that she hadn't before. This wasn't contained between us. Not in the apartment. Not in private conversations. Not even inside the company. It had crossed a line. And once something becomes public, it doesn't go back. I'll fix this, she said finally, but her voice didn't sound certain anymore. I looked back at the article. The photo still sitting there like a quiet accusation. You should try, I said, and ended the call. Outside, the city kept moving like nothing had changed. But inside her world, everything had already started to shift. While everything around Lily started accelerating, I slowed down. That was the difference. She was reacting. I was structuring. The first account I separated was the simplest one, joint checking. Not frozen, just redirected. My salary moved to a new account under my name alone. No announcement, no discussion, just a quiet shift in flow. By the time Lily noticed, it would already be old news. That same afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor 2 districts away. Not ours. Someone with no connection to her family, her firm, or anyone who might mention my name in passing. I didn't explain much. I didn't need to. I outlined assets, property, investments, shared liabilities. Then I asked one question. What's the cleanest way to separate exposure without triggering attention immediately? He understood the tone. People always do when you remove emotion from the equation. We build a sequence. Not aggressive, not illegal, just precise. Accounts restructured under review clauses. Automatic payments reassigned. Access permissions quietly adjusted. Everything documented. Everything reversible on paper, but directional in practice. That night, Lily came home late again. Earlier than the night before. Later than normal. She walked in without saying anything at first, dropped her bag by the door, and stood there like she was listening for something. Silence. The apartment felt different, even if she couldn't explain why. "Hey," she said finally. "Hey." I replied from the couch, laptop open. She stepped closer, slower this time, watching me, measuring something. "Things are a little intense at work," she said. "I can imagine." "They're overreacting," she added quickly. "It's just optics. It'll pass." I nodded once. Maybe. She sat across from me, leaning forward slightly. "We're okay though, right?" That question came too early. Too direct. I closed the laptop gently and looked at her. "We're stable," I said. "Not the same thing." She noticed. Her fingers tightened together in her lap. "That doesn't sound like you." "It's accurate," I replied. A flicker of frustration crossed her face. "Why are you being like this?" I held her gaze calm. "Like what?" "Detached," she said. "Cold." I considered that for a moment. "I think I'm just being careful," I said. "With me?" she asked. "With everything." That answer didn't comfort her. It wasn't supposed to. She leaned back, exhaling slowly, trying to regain control of the conversation. "This will blow over," she said again, softer now. "You'll see. In a week, no one will care." I didn't respond, because whether she was right or not didn't matter anymore. I had already moved past the point where her situation defined mine. Later that night, after she went to bed, I sat in the dark living room and reviewed one more document. Legal consultation notes. Not a filing. Not yet. Just positioning. Contingencies. Language that turned possibility into readiness. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and sat there for a moment, listening to the quiet. Upstairs, Lily shifted in her sleep. Downstairs, everything was already changing. She just didn't know it yet. The investigation became official on a Monday morning. No announcement, no dramatic email blast, just a calendar invite. Compliance review, mandatory attendance. Lily saw it at 8:03 a.m. I knew because she stopped mid-sentence while pouring coffee. Her phone still in her hand, eyes locked on the screen like something had just rewritten her morning. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, carefully, "Internal review, standard procedure." I nodded. "Of course." She left 20 minutes later than usual. No breakfast, no makeup, just a tight expression and a silence that followed her out the door. By noon, the structure around her had already started to shift. Access restrictions, temporary audit flags, project files reassigned for transparency. All quiet changes, all visible if you knew where to look. At 2:14 p.m., she called. Her voice was different this time. Not defensive, not controlled, uncertain. "They're reviewing everything," she said. "Expenses, approvals, internal communications, everything." I let a second pass. "That makes sense." "No, it doesn't," she said quickly. "This is excessive. It's because of that article. Because of," she stopped, "because of what you sent." She didn't say it. She didn't need to. Grant said it's routine, she added, but the way she said his name had changed. Less confidence. More distance. I looked out the window, watching clouds move slowly over the buildings. And you believe him? I asked. Silence. Then quieter. He's handling his side. That was the first crack. Not in her tone, in her certainty. By the end of the day, the second crack appeared. Grant issued a statement. Internal only, carefully worded. He denied any inappropriate relationship, emphasized professional boundaries, reinforced commitment to company integrity, and then, almost invisibly, shifted responsibility. He referenced independent decisions made within his division. He didn't name Lily, but he didn't protect her either. When she got home that night, I saw it immediately. Not anger, not panic, something worse. Isolation. They're questioning my approvals, she said, dropping her bag without looking at me. Like I acted alone. I stayed where I was. Did you? I asked. She looked up sharply. No, of course not. Grant signed off on everything. But he says otherwise. Her mouth opened, then closed. That was the moment it landed. Not the investigation. Not the article. Not even the board. Him. He had stepped away from her. Cleanly. Professionally. Completely. They can't do that, she said, but there was no force behind it now. Just disbelief. They can, I replied calmly. And they are. She sat down slowly, like her legs weren't entirely reliable. My account are under review, she said. They froze discretionary access. I can't even approve basic expenses without secondary authorization. I nodded once. That's standard, I said. For fraud investigations, she snapped, the words slipping out before she could stop it. The room went quiet. She realized what she had just said. I didn't react. I didn't need to, because now she could hear it too. The language had changed, from optics to process, from process to consequence. I didn't do anything wrong, she said, but this time it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. I stood, walked to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. When I handed it to her, our fingers didn't touch. They're not deciding that yet, I said. They're just looking. She stared at the glass in her hands. And for the first time since this started, she had no one left to stand beside her. Not Grant, not her team, not even the system she thought she understood. Everything that once protected her was stepping back and letting her face it alone. It ended on a Thursday, not with a fight, not with a scene, with a meeting. Lily didn't tell me about it directly. She didn't need to. I saw in the way she dressed that morning. Too formal, too precise. Navy suit, hair pulled back, no jewelry except her watch. Armor. They want to finalize the review, she said, standing by the door. I nodded. Makes sense. She hesitated, like she wanted to say something else. Maybe ask for support. Maybe ask me to stand beside her. But she didn't, because somewhere, even she understood that part was already gone. Okay, she said quietly and left. The meeting lasted 3 hours. I know because she came back at 2:18 p.m., and she didn't walk in the way she usually did. No keys dropped. No bag tossed aside. She stepped in slowly, like she was entering a place that no longer belonged to her. I was in the living room, waiting. She looked at me, eyes hollow in a way I hadn't seen before. They enforced it, she said. I didn't ask what. I already knew. The claws, she continued, voice thin. Temporary control shift, effective immediately. I nodded once, and I asked. Her lips pressed together before she answered. I'm suspended, pending full investigation. There it was. Not optics, not rumors. Structure, real consequence. She laughed then. A small, broken sound that didn't belong to the version of her I had known. Do you know who supported it? She asked. I didn't answer, because I wanted her to say it. My mother. The words landed heavy. She didn't even hesitate. Lily continued. She said the company comes first. That perception matters. That this is necessary. I watched her carefully. For anger, for defiance. But there was something else. Understanding. Too late. She sided with you, Lily said. No, I replied calmly. She sided with the company. That's the same thing right now, she whispered. Silence filled the room. Then she looked around. At the walls, the furniture, the life we had built, and for the first time, she saw it the way I already did. Separate. Ethan, she started, but the word didn't go anywhere. I stood up slowly. There are documents on the table. I said, financial separation, asset division outline, preliminary. Her eyes moved to the papers, then back to me. You planned all of this, she said, not accusing, just stating it. I prepared. I corrected. She swallowed, her composure slipping piece by piece. I can fix this, she said, but it sounded distant now. Weak, like something she didn't fully believe anymore. I shook my head once. This wasn't one moment, Lily. I said, it was a pattern. That word again, the same one she ignored when it still mattered. Her shoulders dropped. And just like that, the last layer of control left her. I didn't think, she started, then stopped. I know, I said quietly. That was the truth. She didn't think it would go this far. She thought it was contained, manageable, reversible. But some things aren't. She looked at me one last time. Not with anger, not with manipulation, just clarity, and maybe a little regret. But regret is quiet, and it doesn't change outcomes. I picked up my keys, paused for a second at the door, then said the only thing that mattered. You should have taken the warning seriously. I left before she could answer. Outside, the air felt still, clean. For the first time in weeks, nothing was unresolved. Behind me, everything she had